Welcome to the Church of Love, a podcast hosted by myself, Jyoti, along with co-hosts Swamini Shraddhananda Saraswati and Reverend Rachel Schwab. The show is produced by Frida Media, LLC, and is taped live every Sunday. The Church of Love will explore the changing dynamic of spirituality worldwide and the common belief that God is, in whatever shape he, she, it takes, the essence of love. We hope to remind you that you are love and are loved. So sit back, relax, and join us at the Church of Love.
And this week on Church of Love, we welcome Nischala Devi, who is discussing living a heart-centered life. Nischala Joy Devi was educated by masters in India and worldwide, and she was a monastic disciple of Sri Swami Satchidananda Ji for over 20 years, developing the yoga portion of the landmark research and pioneering yoga for life-threatening diseases. Dean Ornish's program for reversing heart disease and Commonweal cancer help program culminated in the creation of her Yoga of the Heart certification course for teachers and health professionals. Additionally, she created Healing Relationships, a yoga therapy training to enhance intuition and assessment skills for yoga therapists. She serves on the Advisory Council for International Association of Yoga Therapists, author of several CDs and books, including A Woman's Guide to the Heart and Spirit of the Yoga Sutras, and her latest book is Meditation in the Yoga Tradition. Nischala, we thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Yes,
It's wonderful to be here.
So glad
it's
you're
fun.
here.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
This is Swamini, and so before I ask you the first question, I would ask if you would honor us by leading us in a centering prayer.
Yes. Can we do Sanskrit and English?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Let's take this one because I think it's so appropriate now, and it's a Vedic chant that goes back thousands and thousands of years, and it's very simple at the same time. So we'll do it, if we could do it responsively, and then I'll do the English translation for it, okay? So let's have a nice posture. Elongate the spine and have the top of the head reaching into the heavens. Take a deep breath and let it out ever so slowly, and feel yourself just softening, settling into that place of peace in the center of your heart. Asato ma sat gamaya.
Asato ma sadgamaya.
Tamasho ma jyotir gamaya.
Tamasho ma jyotirgamaya.
Mrityor ma amritam gamaya. Amritam gamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Om
Shanti Shanti Shanti.
And it means, please lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from the darkness into the light. Lead us from the fear of death to the knowledge that we are all immortal in the spirit. Om peace, peace, peace. Namaste.
Namaste.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've had the honor of meeting you previously and actually of taking your training. And I just, I remember my training with you 10 years ago now, being touched and inspired by your authenticity. by your gentle but straightforward and very spiritual heart. I remember the wonderful stories you shared. You really inspired me. And that was a pivotal time of growth for me. And so to have someone like you to look up to and to hear from, to have you as a teacher really meant a lot. Today is a pivotal time of growth for so many. Between the challenges of COVID-19 and the shutdown for much of the country, the protest and support of Black lives, and the anti-protesters. Between all of this, people are facing great challenges. What do you suggest living a heart-centered life means today? And how does that support people in making it through these very challenging times?
Even as you say it, it's all I can do to keep myself from crying. The pain and suffering that is out there right now in our world is so palpable. It's impossible to ignore, as I see it. And on the other side, just like that chant we just did, it gave the duality. It's darkness into light. And that's what I also see when I watch some of these protesters. The other day, I couldn't keep the tears in my eyes when I was watching these policemen kneeling as the coffin went by. I just couldn't do that, because that's who we are. If we don't feel for our brothers and sisters, what's the point of all this? If we think of them as other, what's the point? Why are we sitting? It was interesting. I was thinking the other day of a saying that struck me so much from Jesus. And it says, don't come to the altar and pray if you haven't made friends with your brother or sister. And that's really how I feel about this, because who are these people? Are they other? No, they're us. We're all the same. We're all the same in the spirit. Their bodies may be different. Their skin color may be different. Their gender may be different. Their language, but we're all the same. I can say that because I feel like I've spent the last so many years of my life focusing on that, on the oneness and who we all are. And I think it's the responsibility of those who have done so much work and have focused on this to be there for total support, no matter who talks to us, no matter why they talk to us. So this has been a wake-up call for many people. And if those of us that were conscious watched it, we're really not surprised, because this has been coming. This is something that's a long time coming. You cannot oppress anyone for a long time without something happening. It's just, it's not in the realm of our spiritual integrity. You can't do that. And to me, the spiritual law is the highest law. The governmental law is lower, the human law is lower, but that divine law, you can't mess with it. And if you do, something like this happens. You can't treat another person other than a divine being without consequences. And that's what has happened. So my heart is aching on one side and hopeful on the other that things will change. And they need to change. And those of us that can go out and march, we do. Those of us that send out spiritual things, that's what we do. So we all do our part. Yeah, but it's a rough time. It's a rough time. And I feel like most of my spiritual practice has brought me to this moment in time. Yeah.
Well, and thank you for that. And I have to say, Nischala, I appreciate your breadth of your spiritual awareness, especially for other faith traditions, quoting other traditions, but also embracing them in your path. And one of the questions that I often am curious about myself, and then for our audience, is For yourself, the spiritual calling comes in many ways and in many forms and at different stages and ages of our life. And I am wondering when, for you, did you first recognize the healing connection between mind, body, and spirit, and then this leading into your spiritual journey? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It happened a really long time ago.
Mm.
And I know time is irrelevant in some cases, but I think when something happens to you at a young age, it's a little bit like soft clay. You can really form it. It really makes a difference. Whereas I think when it happens when we're older, it's a little bit more like trying to get cement. We already formed our thoughts. So as a young child, I started to develop this because I had some physical issues. And I remember my mother taking me to the doctor. I think I was about 6, maybe 5. And it was a he, because all doctors were he's at that time, or most of them. And he started talking to my parents while I was sitting there. And I said, wait a second, I'm here. You talk to me. This is my body. I was 5 or 6. So I started really young, and I haven't stopped, by the way. I was looking for a new dentist. This was so funny. I was looking, and I found this holistic dentist. And I went in. I told him, I said, I need to speak to you first. Mm-hmm. So he said, okay. We set up an appointment, and he came in and that we talked. And then about half hour into it, he looked at me and he said, is this an interview? And I said, you better believe it. If you're going to put your hands in my mouth, I want to know all I can about you. So he said, well, I guess I'm doing okay if you're still here. So that was sort of my foundation, because I realized that nobody was talking to me. People were talking around me. But I think the biggest one that happened, if I may share a little story.
Please do.
I was trained originally in Western medicine as a physician's assistant. And it was 2 years in the hospital training, and then I had to be with a physician for a certain amount of years. And they gave me these slips, and I had to go find a patient and do certain things with the patient. And I walked into this room with my little basket, and I said I looked at the woman, I checked her arm bracelet, and I just said to her, how are you? Just like that, nothing dramatic. And she burst out crying. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay. So I put my basket on the side. I got in bed with her. I put my arms around her, and we both sobbed. I didn't even know what was wrong at that point. I just started sobbing because she was sobbing. And then I said, tell me. And she said, I'm 6 months pregnant. I have cancer. And I have 3 small children at home. I just let her talk. I just held on to her. We both cried, and I let her talk until I heard my name on the loudspeaker. Come to the... Oh my God, I'm in big trouble. So I said to her, I'm so sorry. But she said, no, just thank you for being here at all. And I took my little basket and I went to the supervisor's office. I walked in. Where have you been? She was not happy. And I said, well, this woman in room 604 was really upset. So I stayed with her, and that's not your job. I looked at her and I said, whose job is it? Those that see, that's their job, right? You don't need a requisition. And she said to me, if you do that again, you're off the program. And I remember walking out of there and saying, this isn't right. There's something wrong. It should not be like that. That's not medicine. That's not healing. And I think that's probably why I went on to do what I did. So that incident stayed in my mind for so long, because if we don't comfort the soul of that person, if we don't deal with their fears, how can they ever get well? It's impossible. So, and I feel like that, not just about physical disease, I feel whether it's a social disease, mental disease, any kind of disease, it has to start with the heart and the communion with other souls. Otherwise, what's the point? What's that to me? So I've been working most of my life trying to put the spirit back in Western medicine. And I'm still working.
It's quite a job, isn't it? I know. I've been spending a lot of time this month doing that. Absolutely. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up real quick with you on that, because speaking of the heart, I've just, as a pastor, I've just gotten the okay now that Pennsylvania was we could move to the stage where pastors could visit members, or, spiritual leaders could visit folks in the hospital. Now, we still can't go to nursing homes, etc., as long as the person doesn't have COVID. But it's been very interesting, Nischala, that most of the people, because most of them are elderly, but I would say out of the 6 people that are currently in the hospital right now for my congregation, 4 of them have heart-related problems. And we were saying that part of it is that they've been alone. And these are people that live alone, or they're older. And just that whole heart-soul connection that you just talked about, I just say, preach it, Nischala, because that is the truth. It is very much the truth, that just that connection to the heart. And many of the folks there, as soon as, they saw another person and saw, we were saying essential services do include spiritual care.
That's right. Absolutely. You're 100% right. And this, I think, is one of the biggest tragedies of this COVID, is that people are dying alone. I had a very interesting incident happen 2 days ago, where some of the people here, we formed we call it a happy hour, but it's not. It's just, we were just trying to be happy. And
that's good too.
People were talking, and they were saying, oh, I had to cancel this and I had to cancel this. And there was one woman on our call, a good friend of mine, my next door neighbor actually. And she got very quiet, and she said, some people are really suffering, not just canceling their cruises. Some people are really suffering. And she called me afterwards and she said, I'm so hurt. I said, why? And she said, my mother just died and I couldn't be there with her. She said, they're talking about superficial things. I couldn't hold her hand. I couldn't be with her when she died. And to me, it's not even the death. It's everything around it. So to me, you should be an essential worker. Of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know if you saw this on the news. It was at Easter. This Catholic priest who wanted to keep I don't know if you saw this, who wanted to keep all the CDC rules. Yeah, he had bought a squirt gun and he was blessing people and the Easter basket.
From squirting them.
You go there.
I said, that was awesome. I said, I was going to do that as soon as they let me in. I said, well, I can at least, you want to be baptized? Boom, we'll squirt you. It works,
So, I mean, do you gung water?
That's why he put holy water in it.
Yes,
he put holy water. Yeah. And to me, that's the spirit pushing through in spite of everything.
Absolutely.
You find a way, but keeping people from their spirit. And it's interesting because the healthcare workers had to become family, healthcare workers, and clergy all in one.
That's right.
And they're going to need it afterwards. They're going to really need that. Yeah. So, I understand, and I understand that feeling. And, just put you in that PPE just like the nurses are. Let you go in. We have protection that nurses don't always have. All those,
Correct.
most nurses I know are such spiritual beings. They all are. They're just, they're amazing. You see them. So yeah, I think it's a really, it's difficult on all levels: physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. It's really, and those that don't have a deep spiritual practice, I think, are suffering more, because what do you hold on to? There's nothing to hold on to if you don't have that. Yeah.
Right.
So thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you again so much for being here. On a quick side note, Swamini Ji, I just want to say Matthew got me water guns. So again, if you've got Ganga water, I'll hook you up.
You don't have it, I'll send it to you. I have.
But so Nischala, your beautiful teacher, Swami Satchidananda, he entered my life when I was, I want to say probably 19 or 20. So, and I remember sitting in my living room and listening to a tape of him leading meditation. And that's how I learned how to meditate, was from him. And I had no context or conceptualization of who he was or what impact he had on this world. I just knew his name on a tape and his voice and how that helped mold me. And he was such a powerful leader, and he found a place in the mainstream through his appearance at Woodstock. He shared a message of love and peace, and he said that at Woodstock, if I'm not mistaken, that he had a conversation with Gandhi's grandson when he went back to India, and I think the grandson had asked, like, what is happening in America? And Satchidananda said, well, America's helping everyone in the material field. And he proceeded to say, now it's time for America to step up and lead in the spiritual world. And this was in the 70s, right? So one of the things as you're—
Wait a minute. You weren't in your 20s in the 70s.
No, I was not. I was not.
You're a little bit in the darkness there, but I can see that. Yeah.
No, I was born in the 70s. But yeah, so but as you're talking too about, some of the struggles that you're seeing and the pain that people are in, and you specifically were talking about, putting the heart into Western medicine. What you said really struck me, because I think it's also just putting the heart into everything, and that's just businesses. And if I'm not mistaken, just thinking off the top of my head, I believe that every single employer I've ever worked for has always been essentially male dominated, except for maybe one. And we were talking with a previous guest about the energy of Shakti and the importance of the divine feminine, and how there's a strength and there's a nurturing that comes with that. And what I see so much in this country before we even got into COVID-19 is this complete breakdown of these things that humans usually have, that it is what makes us human, right? So it's the ability to connect with one another, to have community. It's the aspect of creating, it is also being in nature. And slowly over the past several hundred years, we've been ripping these apart from our lives. And the technology's really kind of taken that last little bit of community that we needed. And so here we are now in, the space of COVID-19, and so many people are now further isolated. So your community is all completely artificial now, right? And on top of all of that, as humans too, just as looking at humans as a species, we are one of the rare species that has this very strong desire to help others. So we don't need to have a reason why, we don't have to have a guarantee that we're going to get something in return or be bullied to. We just naturally want to help anyone, including strangers. And so we see, particularly in this country, this separation of I and we, and how, there is this desire for material, and Satchidananda saw that, in the 70s, and he said, okay, you got that down and you're helping others with the material, but now let's move this way. He's like encouraging people, like, don't forget who you are, why you're here, help. And, let's go ahead and increase this vibration here. And, just recently I was, there's this couple that just was talking about the protests on television, and as you probably are aware, there's instances where, not just this one, but previously, like cars running over people, and there was one where a truck was going through, and they were advocating it. And they're like, oh yeah, if I was driving a car and there's protesters in my way, I'm running over them, you know, no problem. And if anyone were to touch my car windows, you can guarantee I'd run over them. And so that is then putting property above human lives, right? And so I guess I wanted to know, in your experience of working with people, how do we embrace that inner Shakti, that divine feminine, that strength, but nurturing, in order to cultivate this we-ness, to cultivate this opportunity to take care of one another, to open the heart, to live from the heart, to put down our barriers and have authentic relationships with each other, to see the humanness in each other, so that eventually we can actually you can etherically love God and say that you love God and you believe in God and God is all love. But if you can't love each other and love yourself, there is no way to have that connection.
No way. Yeah, I agree.
So tell me,
the question.
Yes. So in your experience, in your teachings and your time with Swami Satchidananda, how have you seen things in the past that could apply now to teaching people to have these authentic, loving relationships, to see the humanness of each other, and to support and love one another?
Well, I'm going to start with a little story that you might think, where is she coming from with that? But stay with me. A friend of mine, they had a fire in their house. And she called her teenage daughter to please come home. It was mostly smoke damage, fortunately. And she called her teenage daughter to come home and help. And she said, oh, I don't want to come home. I'm in the middle of the thing. I'm having a good time with my friends. You can deal with it. Oh, the house didn't burn down. We're okay then. And then her mother said, your clothes were affected. I'll be right there. Right? So why am I saying this? The people that are running down people with their cars, that are shooting them, that are cursing at them, whatever they're doing it because they think those people are other. That's why they're doing it. If that was their child, if that was their mother, if that was their aunt, their uncle, their next door neighbor, they would never do it. So the problem is we have a block not allowing us to recognize the spirit in other people as the same spirit in us. To me, this is what spirituality and religion, to some extent, has been trying to tell people for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. It doesn't work if you hate your neighbor. It doesn't work if you see somebody with a different color skin as not you. But we've ignored it because we were making money or we weren't making money and we had to work, or whatever our excuse was. And it's finally brought us to this, that people are taking 2, 3, 4,000 pound vehicles and driving them into other people. This is not normal. I have to say that, whatever that means, normal. To me, love is normal. Hate is not normal. It's something that's cultivated and something that we're not born with hate. We're born with love. And as we begin to cultivate it more and more and see that person as us, all that goes away. Everything goes away. And where are we going to learn that? That's the question. So it was before the job of the parents and the job of the religious institution. That's who was supposed to be teaching us that these things are helpful, these things are not helpful. But we don't seem to have gotten it well enough there. So we need to then show people through our films, through our literature, through our, everything needs to start pointing toward love instead of hate. And until that happens, It's just not going to work. A lot of people are learning these awful things on television or from the movies. So I think, and I'm not into censorship, don't misconstrue this, but the people who are making them, like when I wrote the Namaste Effect, I had no idea this was coming. But I saw enough of hatred in the world, and I said, this has to be about love. We have to start loving each other. There's no question about it. And then when we see something like this, and to me, 90% or higher, maybe 98, 99% of these people that are out protesting right now are doing it for the right reason. They're doing it because they care. They could be home watching TV. They could be doing all kinds of things, but they're not. They're out there peacefully doing this to make a point and to hopefully change things. So I think that the use of force will never bring about a peaceful ending that we want. And as far as the Shakti is concerned, I personally am thrilled to see these incredible mayors that are women. And boy, they aren't taking anything. The mayor of Atlanta, I just adore her. And I said to my husband, I said, you can tell she's a mother of four. That's how she talks. She talks to us like we're her kids. And I love you a lot, and I won't tolerate this. So I think a lot of these mayors and governors who are women or embracing the feminine within them. And I'm going to add the California Governor Newsom, and I'm going to add Cuomo also to that, because I think what they're doing is doing it in a feminine way. They're explaining to people, you're intelligent. This is how I'm going to speak to you, instead of you do this or you're bad people. That doesn't work. So the Shakti comes in, and boy, I think it's coming in really strong. Nancy Pelosi, I mean, look at what she's doing. I'm not sure when she was elected last time that she realized that this is what she's going to be dealing with. But so I think the Shakti is coming forth because even though you can be a warrior and be Shakti, there's still the heart connection. It's all motivated by love, don't you think? And when you're motivated by love, nothing can really go wrong with it. Even if you make the biggest mistake, you correct it and move on. So that's how I feel the Shakti is coming through. And those people that are marching, they're bringing Shakti. I mean, it's a quiet Shakti, but boy, it's powerful. And when they're quiet, thousands of people for not, what was it, 9.5 or 8.5 minutes? I can never remember, or 40 seconds, how long it took them to die. When there's silence, that's when you talk about spirit being present. Mm. Oh my God. They're all down on one knee in silence. It doesn't matter who they're praying to. Who cares? It's all the same anyway. Whichever channel you do, if you look at news on channel 5 or channel 7, still news, right? So whoever they're praying to, I don't care. But that Shakti, that power, that benevolent power of love has to be there. Yeah. Don't you think?
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I was at the protest in DC yesterday, and the one thing that struck me the most, because they were saying about 100,000 people would be there, and I think they counted 200,000 total, is that people would move in and, you know, and go for how long and move out. But it was like just very fluid. Everyone was wearing masks. They were giving each other space. From the moment, like we joined in with this group that's like moving forward, there was stands with free food, free water, like everyone's saying, like, you know, keep hydrated, keep yourself, like, you know, have the strength, the energy, eat here. There are people walking through the streets with backpacks and signs that says, like, I've got medical supplies, know your rights, here's packets with your rights if you get, you know, arrested. Like, it was just completely this nurturing space. There's DJs and musicians and people are dancing, and there's people making signs. If you didn't bring your own sign, come here, we'll make a sign for you. It was just one big hug, you know, of like, I support you. let's do this together. Everyone just was so united, and it was like you're saying, it was just Shakti at its most incredible, beautiful.
And the mayor is Shakti herself.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So did you see that big Black Lives Matter on the street?
No, because everyone's standing there.
I saw a satellite picture this morning from space, and you can see it.
Yeah.
I mean, she did that at 4 a.m. because she didn't want anybody to stop her. That's what I mean, that Shakti. And then the protesters know her, feel her support.
Yes.
And are taking on that energy. There was something that happened after 9/11. I don't know if you heard about this, but the mothers were very upset because they wanted to tell their children about it, but they didn't know how, because they said if they talked bad about the perpetrators, then they would start to hate people, and they didn't want that. So Mr. Rogers was still alive at the time, and they went to talk to him. And they said, what do we tell our children? How do we do this? And he looked at them, he's just, in his very quiet way, he said, tell them to watch the helpers. Yeah. And that's what I'm doing in this. I'm not watching the people that looted, although I do understand why they did it. I don't condone it, but I understand it. But what I'm seeing is like what you're talking about, the people saying medical care, or I guess Andrew Cuomo has people walking around handing out, this is where you can get tested. If you were in a big group, this is where you can get tested. Instead of saying to them, don't do it, help them do it.
Yeah.
That's what I always say to people, help them do it. That shows your heart and your solidarity with them. I want to help you. I don't want to stop you from doing what you're doing. It's good what you're doing. It's necessary what you're doing. But here, be safe while you're doing it. Yeah. Good for you for going down there. Yeah, you.
A stark contrast between, and I've been to 2 of our local protests so far, and same thing here, handing out water, making signs, just wonderful relationships that are being built there, and learning about each other. And I can't help but look and see that there is such a stark contrast between the protests now with regard to Black Lives Matter and the protests that happened at the State House, where, the basic well-armed, white, predominantly, men predominantly showed up to protest having to stay home for COVID.
Yeah.
And I look at that and I say, toxic masculinity, even in some women, versus a healthy femininity, even in some men, and definitely a lot of men. And then I sit and I think, because I ponder so many different things, and I think, why on earth would one choose the toxic masculinity side versus the healthy divine feminine? Why would one choose? And then, of course, I think it comes back to just this idea that there's a consistent illness that's plaguing humanity right now, and that's something that maybe we can have you come back for part 2 and talk about. Yeah, I think so. But you're so inspiring, Nischala. You truly.
Oh, thank you. It's so sweet.
I know we're running out of time, but you are a great storyteller. I would just like, before we come into closing, I would love to ask you to tell us a short story of something you experienced with Sri Swami Satchidanandaji that you has affected your heart, changed your life, opened your mind.
Mm-hmm. First, can I make a comment about what you said?
Yes, please do.
What it boils down to, why you would go toxic masculinity versus soft femininity, I think there's one word, and this is what I keep seeing everywhere: fear. There's a fear, and it's not always a tangible fear, but these people that were protesting, instead of going there and saying, look, I need to feed my family. Please, we need to open up. That's a more feminine way of doing it. Giving it a reason. My family needs to eat. I'm afraid I can't pay the mortgage. But that means that your heart is open. Instead, if you're so afraid, you just clamp down and then you start to hurt people. And it just gets all muddy. But I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, and one that has stayed with me. I was very fortunate because I was with Swamiji for quite a while, 18 years, really 25, but 18 as a Swami. And I got to travel all over the world with him because that was my karma at that time. But one incident, and I think this also ties into what we're talking about. We were actually in, I think we were in Colorado at the time. And we were, it had been very moist the night before, not rain, but moist. And we were deciding to go across a park. And there was all grass, beautiful grass in the park. And there was, I think, 3 of us and then Swamiji. And so he was walking a little bit in front of us. And I don't know if you ever saw him physically, but he was a big man. He was tall, not big this way, but tall, kind of slender. And so he was walking and we were walking behind him and he was walking on the grass. And I looked down and I noticed that when he placed his foot on the grass and then it picked it up to make the next step, the grass popped back up. So I looked down at my feet, wasn't happening. I stepped and the grass stayed down. And then I looked at my other friends, same thing. So I caught up to him after a while and I was watching this phenomenon, very curious. I'm always curious about everything. And so I said to him, Swamiji, what is this phenomenon? You're twice my size. You weigh twice as much as I do. Yet when you step, the grass pops back up. When I step, it stays down. Why is that? He got very quiet. He stopped, turned around, looked at me, and he got very quiet. And he said, well, you know, there's millions and millions of little creatures living in this earth. You walk across it without thought. To me, this is not a piece of earth. This is my mother's bosom. And when I walk on this land, I'm walking on my mother's bosom. And that's the reference. And she knows it.
Wow.
And that's why she pops up the grass again. I have never forgotten it. I never walk across grass without thinking about that and saying a prayer or a mantra or something for all those little creatures. And I've taken it not to the little creatures, but for the big creatures also. And I think that is what will save this planet. This is what will save the humans on the planet by realizing that this is our mother. These are our brothers and sisters. We're made from her. And if we don't respect and love her, she's going to be destroyed. So that's my remembrance of Swamiji.
Thank you.
That was incredibly beautiful and moving. And wow, thank you so much for sharing that. I really appreciate it.
My joy. Thank you.
Nischala Devi, thank you for being with us this evening and just sharing so many beautiful stories and experiences and words of wisdom with us and our listeners today. And for those of you listening, you can learn more about Nischala's classes and about her new book, Meditation in the Yoga Tradition, on her website, abundantwellbeing.com. You can also follow her on social media. Facebook is Nischala Joy Devi, and on Twitter at Nischala Devi. Thank you.
Thank you all so
much. Thank you all. Thank you all. This was
a joy.
You.
This was a joy to meet you. Thank you.
This is the satsanga that we need. Yes. We need to have each other at this point. Yeah.
Yes,
thank you.
Absolutely.
Be well and continue your glorious service.
Yeah. Thank you.
much for joining
Thank you.
us for this amazing conversation. Nischala Devi brought such authentic and sincere discussion to our table. I can only imagine how the listeners must feel. Can you sense the change that is happening? The shift in spirituality, religion, and society? Has today's program inspired you to be just a little more aware about where you intend to bring your practice? If in fact you're looking for a new church or an alternate teaching, or perhaps today's show has illustrated the powerfulness and the symbology of the current movement of people looking for a sacred space where they belong. It's helpful to remember spirituality is a journey, and that journey is a little bit different for each of us. Let's not judge the journey of others. Instead, we can hold the highest intention of understanding, empathy, and unity, no matter the labels we apply. Thank you for joining us for the Church of Love. Remember, you are love and you are loved. Be well, everyone. Namaste.
Namaste. Beautiful. Wow.